Welcome to this week's episode of Humans in 5.
Now, we love that all of our viewers use their eyes and their ears to enjoy our segments every week. We hope that we're keeping your senses of sight and hearing entertained.
When we're young and in school, we spend a lot of time learning about the 5 senses. We're often taught rhymes or other devices to help us remember these senses, including sight, sound, taste, touch, and smell.
We're reminded again and again about how important these senses are and how they are traditionally shared between all human beings. But when we're thinking about how we experience the world, do these 5 senses really cover everything?
Researchers have found that there's somewhere between 4 and 21 different senses. This may sound like a crazy number, but includes senses that we somewhat take for granted. There's our sense of balance, our ability to stop ourselves from falling over after we trip. We have an awareness of where our bodies are in space. For example, most people are aware of how close their hands are to their face without needing to look.
There are also some cases where we seem to have fewer senses. As noted by researcher Constance Claassen, some people consider our senses of smell and taste as intrinsically linked and really just one sense. Remember trying to taste food the last time you had a cold? When you lose your sense of smell, things taste differently, since food is more than just what goes in your mouth.
We're also in tune with our sense of temperature. We may not always dress appropriately, but we know when it's hot and when it's cold. We also know when we're thirsty or when we need to eat or drink. On the more abstract side of things, we also have a sense of time. We know the difference between a 5-minute speech and a 2-hour speech.
The number of senses is not just a biological subject, but a cultural one too. That means anthropologists are in a great place to understand how people from different cultures think about all of the sensory information that we receive.
Different cultures prioritize different senses. For example, North Americans and many other Western cultures are really focused on sight. We tend to believe our eyes over our other senses. For example, we navigate using landmarks and by visually judging distances, while some cultures navigate by feeling ocean currents and sensing movement, or by listening closely to the world around them.
One key way to understand how cultures process and interpret senses in our language. As we're a very sight-oriented culture, we use sight-related words to give extra weight to our words with metaphors. We tend to see a point of view or see what someone is getting at.
Researchers from the Max Planck Institute of Psycholinguistics worked to find out how language and our perceptions interact. A team led by Asifa Majid and Stephen Levinson found that English speakers were great at using words to identify colors, but were terrible at using familiar terms to identify scents, like cinnamon or lemon.
How we interpret sensory information is also cultural. For example, in English, we differentiate between blue and green. However, in many diverse languages, there's no distinction between these two colors. They're considered to be different shades of the same color.
And there's also individual variation in how we detect external information. For example, researcher John Murata notes that a wine or food connoisseur who has trained their brain to taste things in a particular way experiences food very differently than the rest of us.
So while our bodies may detect what's going on in the world around us, all of this input is shaped by the culture we grow up in. We may take our 5 senses for granted, but there's a lot more to how we sense our world than what we often think.
Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time on Humans in 5.
And don't forget to subscribe.